Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, I would like to talk about one of my absolute favorite subjects, which is linguistics. And within the field of linguistics, talking about phonetics and phonology, specifically the International Phonetic Alphabet. For those of you that don't know, in my day job, I am a linguistic researcher, so I use linguistic theory all the time. And I think that the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA, is such a useful and cool tool for linguistic research, and I would love to share a little bit about it with you today. I actually have some notes pulled up off to the side, so if you see me looking off, it's because I'm looking at my notes, but I will try and explain everything as clearly and as succinctly as I can. So without any further ado, let's get straight to it. So first off, let's talk about phonetics. Phonetics is the study of phones, which are the minimal units that make up a language. So the smallest possible components that contribute to language and its meaning. For spoken languages, this is speech sounds, which is what we'll be talking about today. And for signed languages, this is the discrete components that make up meaning in signed languages, such as hand shape, movement, location, etc. But today we will be talking about spoken languages. There are 3 branches of phonetics. They are articulatory, acoustic, and auditory. Articulatory is what we'll be talking about today. This is how speech sounds are produced. Acoustic is the physical properties of speech sounds that are produced by articulation. And auditory is how sounds are perceived in the ear. But today we'll be talking about how speech sounds are produced, or that is to say, articulated. So one of the reasons the IPA was created was in order to, or the primary reason the IPA was created was in order to be able to transcribe the speech sounds that we hear and are produced in the human vocal tract. And you may be thinking, we already have ways of writing down speech. It's called spelling, it's called writing, but there are a lot of difficulties when it comes to accurately representing speech sounds in writing. For example, how would you pronounce this word? G-H-O-T-I. You might say, well, obviously, this is goatee or something like that. But what if we were to say that the GH is pronounced like tough? The O is pronounced like I, as in women, and the TI is pronounced as in nation. Then we get a word that is pronounced fish. Now obviously we don't pronounce this word as fish, but there are a lot of difficulties when it comes to taking an already existing spelling convention and producing it and applying it to spoken language. Another difficulty that we have when it comes to mapping spelling to sounds is making up for individual speech differences and different language varieties. So for example, I have an American accent and I produce this word as litter. Litter. However, someone with a British accent might produce this as something like litter. Litter. I don't really do accents, so you will have to just use your imagination a little bit, but we can't use conventional spelling to account for differences in accents or language varieties. Spelling can obviously be misleading. So if we take that GH sound, or even O-U-G-H, O-U-G-H, this same group of letters is pronounced differently in cough, tough, bow, through, and though. It's the same group of letters, but very different pronunciations, and linguists need a way to account for this. And then finally, we have a set of speech sounds that are used across the world languages, but we have very different writing systems. So for example, I could write this, or this, or this, and they all essentially say the same thing, or are more or less pronounced the same way. However, we want to have one writing system that tells us how we can transcribe the world's languages. So what we need is something that we can use to transcribe all of the world's languages that represents all possible speech sounds, a system that maps one symbol to one sound, so none of that pesky OUGH business where one set of symbols maps to multiple sounds. We want something that is, for the most part, easy to learn and based off of an already existing system, and something that is easy to print or type, so something that largely already exists. Now, I will say that the International Phonetic Alphabet takes a slightly Eurocentric approach in this regard, as it's largely based off of the Latin alphabet and to a degree Greek and Cyrillic alphabets, but it is a system that maps one sound to one symbol, so that when you see a particular symbol, you know it's always pronounced a particular way. So this is where the IPA comes in. This is a transcription system invented by the International Phonetic Association that allows us to transcribe all possible sounds across the world's languages. It identifies which sounds are the same in different languages. So for example, is an English k sound the same as a Spanish k sound? And which are different. For example, an English R sound is different than a Spanish R sound, even though they're written with the same letter. And we can accurately represent different language varieties and accents using this system, because something like litter or litta will be written differently in IPA, even though they're written the same way in standard English spelling. And that is where the IPA comes in. In the IPA, we have exactly what we wanted. where one symbol maps to one sound. And this is a chart showing the IPA symbols for the English consonants. This is just English. There are more consonants and more symbols than these, but these are the sounds found in English. This chart shows 3 different components that make up consonant sounds: the place of articulation, the manner of articulation, and voicing. So, when we make speech sounds, a couple of steps are involved. First, air is pushed out of the lungs. So in English, all speech sounds are made on the exhale. As it is pushed out of the lungs, the airstream passes through the larynx, where it begins to vibrate the vocal folds found in our throat. And then the airstream is modified within the vocal tract, so that is our throat, mouth, and nose, in order to produce different kinds of sounds. And finally, the air exits the mouth or the nose, and a speech sound is produced. The vocal tract is where air is modified or sound is modified in order to produce different speech sounds. And these are laid out in the International Phonetic Alphabet. So, for example, in English, some of the primary places of articulation are the lips. These are called bilabial sounds. The alveolar ridge. This is the hard ridge of bone directly behind your top teeth. If you stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth behind your top teeth, you can feel the alveolar ridge. Also in the soft palate, or the velum, and the glottis. So air can be modified or shaped by different parts of the mouth or vocal tract, and that produces different speech sounds. In addition, air can be modified in different manners of articulation, so not only where the air is shaped, but how it is shaped. For example, a plosive or a stop sound involves cutting the airstream off completely and then releasing it all at once. This sounds like p, t, and k. Or fricative sounds involve restricting the air partially and releasing it slowly. Sounds like s, f, and f. Even in that short demonstration, you can hear different sound qualities. P, t, k are short, kind of staccato sounds, and f, s, f are sounds that you can elongate. So with that, let's go into the International Phonetic Alphabet and some of its features. So here is a chart showing the different English consonants. Once again, these are only sounds found in English, whereas more sounds exist in other languages. And this chart is divided by 3 different features. Place of articulation. This is where the sound is modified in the vocal tract. Manner of articulation, so how the air is stopped or restricted by the vocal tract. And then voicing and voicelessness. So these darker shaded columns indicate voiced consonants, and unshaded columns indicate voiceless consonants. Now, voicing is when air is constricted more heavily in the vocal folds, and this produces vibrating. If you hold your hand to your voice box or your larynx and you go, you'll feel that there is no vibration, whereas if you go, you can feel a slight vibration. This is also true if you go pa, pa, pa versus ba, ba, ba. So voiceless sounds do not cause vibration in the vocal folds, and voiced sounds do. Now, English uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 places of articulation, and going from right to left, we move further back in the vocal tract. So bilabial sounds are produced by modifying the shape of the lips. Labiodental sounds involve both the lips and the teeth. Interdental sounds are produced by placing the tip of the tongue in between your teeth. Alveolar sounds involve pressing the tip of your tongue to that alveolar ridge behind your top teeth. Post-alveolar sounds are produced by placing the tongue just behind the alveolar ridge. Palatal is in the middle of the palate. Velar is in the back of the soft palate or the velum. And glottal sounds are produced by your glottis down in your throat. Then we have manner of articulation, which are stops, fricatives, affricates, flaps, nasal sounds, lateral liquid sounds, retroflex liquid sounds, and glides. Stops are produced by stopping the airflow completely and then releasing it all at once. This is p, b, t, d, k, g, and the glottal stop, which is heard in sounds like uh-oh and kitten or button. Fricatives are produced by partially restricting the airflow and releasing it slowly. This is v, v, s, z, sh, zh, and or affricates are essentially a blend of a stop and and a fricative. So the air is stopped very, very briefly and then released somewhat slowly. This is ch and j. A flap is produced by very briefly touching the tongue to the top of the mouth. So in English, these are sounds that you might hear as in butter, butter, where it's not budder or butter, but butter, butter. Nasal sounds are produced by restricting air in the oral cavity and instead releasing it through the nasal cavity. This is m, n, and ng. So this is like an ng sound in sing or thing. This is an ng sound. Lateral liquid sounds are produced by curling the sides of the tongue and releasing air through the sides of the mouth. In English, this is ol, ol. A retroflex liquid is produced by curling the tongue up and releasing air through the sides of the mouth. In English, this is r. And then finally, glides are the least restricted of the consonants. In some languages, these are even called semivowels because they do not restrict the airflow nearly as much as the other consonant types. In English, this is w, and y, y. So what you would think of as a y is represented as a J looking symbol in the IPA. So as you can see, some of these symbols are very familiar. P, B, T, D, K, and G look more or less like how you would expect them to be represented in standard English spelling. But then we have a couple that are a little funny. Sh, zh, ch, j. You would expect to be represented by multiple letters in English spelling like SH or CH. But remember that in the IPA, we want one sound for one symbol, not two symbols for one sound. Then we have the vowels. Vowels are a little bit interesting in English, American English, and even more so, British and Australian English have a relatively large vowel inventory compared to some of the other world languages. And vowels are shown in a chart like this, which very loosely mimics the shape of a human mouth. Vowels are described by their height and their backness, as well as being either tense or lax. So high vowels are produced with a very closed mouth. If you try to say the sounds E or oo, your mouth is much more closed than if you said ah or ah. So high vowels are sometimes also called close vowels because your mouth is more closed. And the lower the vowel gets, the more the tongue root drops and the more open your mouth becomes. So mid vowels are somewhere in the middle. And then you can also go front to back. This is once again describing where your tongue is placed in the mouth. For front vowels, your tongue is placed more forward in the mouth, and in the back, it's moved backwards. Once again, try and say ew, ew. You can kind of feel your tongue move backwards as you move from one vowel sound to another. In addition to these, some vowels are rounded. This is based on the shape of the lips. So once again, when you say E, E, your lips are not rounded at all. But when you say oo, oo, your lips make a rounded shape. And then we have tense and lax vowels. Tense vowels include more tension essentially being held in the tongue and lips compared to lax vowels. So in English, the vowel sounds are E, I, a, e, a, and oo. In addition, we have several diphthongs, I, a, ow, o, and oi, as in boy. So I as in your eye in your face, a as in say, ow as in house, o as in boat, and oi as in boy. You will notice that we have an O and an E-shaped symbol. However, these vowel sounds in American English are only present in diphthongs, which is a combination of essentially two vowel sounds that take up the same space in a syllable. Now, I would like to note that there are many more sounds and vowels than these, but these are the ones that are present in English. Additionally, There are many more consonants than these, but these are the ones that are present in English. So essentially, any English word can be written out using these symbols. So we can compare very briefly IPA to written English. So the example I gave earlier was litter. In my accent, which is American English, I have an OL sound, an I sound, a tapped sound, and an sound. This takes up the space of one syllable, and so I'm going to mark it as syllabic. So in American English, the sound that is pronounced as litter would be written as this in the IPA. Now, if I wanted to represent how it is written in British English, it would look a little bit different. We still have the OL sound and the I sound, but instead of producing a flap, that d sound is pronounced as a more strong t sound. And that sound that is present in British English is omitted. So instead of having a sound, we have a vowel, more specifically a schwa, that gets a little marking because it is still a little bit rhoticized. So here, using the IPA, we can have one word, litter, and an American pronunciation and a British pronunciation. We can clearly distinguish these using IPA transcription. I hope that you found today's video interesting, relaxing. If you are already familiar with the IPA, I would love to hear how you use it. If you are not familiar, I hope you found this video an interesting introduction to phonetics and the International Phonetic Alphabet. If there are other linguistic topics you would be interested in hearing about, I would love to talk more about linguistics. I will take any excuse to talk about linguistics, so all you have to do is ask. If you have questions or something was not particularly well explained, please let me know in the comments, and I would love to discuss phonetics even further. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Good night. Good night.